Let's start the week with a story that's so bizarre, it makes the psychedelic weirdness of Burning Man seem kinda normal. Yeah, we're talking about the clash of climate fascists and the Nevada Rangers who gave us what can only be described as a low-budget Mad Max reboot. Now, Burning Man, according to one of its co-founders, is guided by 10 key principles: radical inclusion, gifting, decommodification, radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, communal effort, civic responsibility, leaving no trace, participation, and immediacy. Some of those are actual words. Of course, nothing says radical inclusion like having to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to sit in the middle of the desert with a bunch of hippies with no plumbing or deodorant. You're essentially paying to be homeless, but with more sand up your ass. But despite this festival being totally civically responsible and doing whatever immediacy means, climate change fascists won't even let celebrities enjoy a good time. These so-called activists, otherwise known as unemployed children who have nothing better to do, have moved on from sending out abused teenagers to do their bidding.
How dare you!
And they've now gone nuclear. Or whatever the green version of nuclear is. Solar. Across the world, at least in places where they know they won't get killed on the spot, they're throwing paint on paintings, gluing themselves to roads, and holding up traffic. Now you might ask, what's green about causing congestion? But remember, don't ask questions, just shut up and worship the sun god. And now it seems things have gotten so bad that even Burning Man isn't safe. So over the weekend, activists tried to block the main road into the festival, chanting catchy and thought-provoking slogans like "Burners of the World Unite," "General Strike for Climate," and of course, abolish capitalism. Because you know capitalism, the only reason the entire world isn't starving to death and burning dung to stay warm. But there's just one problem. Putting people in danger with your petulant selfishness isn't noble, it just makes you a dick. If you're unemployed and want to spend your days screeching about the climate, go for it. But if you're going to put people at risk by clogging up roads, which isn't just inconvenient and counterproductive, but also means people can't get to safety or receive medical care, then you've crossed a line. Unfortunately for these particular people, they forgot they weren't in San Francisco or New York City anymore. They were in Nevada, and Nevada tribal police weren't really interested in playing along with their bullshit.
Did anyone get that?
Yeah.
Carol!
You better move. You're gonna go back.
They're chained!
Get out now! Get out! On the ground! All of you on the ground now! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Don't move!
I guess sometimes you really don't know what's just around the river bend. But for the protesters who now find themselves in jail, don't worry. Our nation's jails are guided by 10 key principles: radical inclusion, gifting, decommodification, radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, communal effort, civic responsibility, leaving no trace, participation, and immediacy. And if sharing a toilet with 50 other criminals doesn't exactly sound like your idea of fun, just think of the water you're saving. So there's this 12-year-old kid, Jaden, just minding his own business, attending the Vanguard School in Colorado Springs. And he's got a backpack. Seems innocent enough, but on it, he's got a patch of the Gadsden Flag, the flag that the left thinks is more racist than Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Ron DeSantis combined. The flag is apparently as controversial as pineapple on pizza, which isn't controversial at all because pineapple on pizza is delicious. So here's what happened. Jaden wore a backpack into school that had a "Don't Tread on Me" Gadsden Flag patch on it, and the school tried to kick him out.
Oh, here, go on. Thank you.
Do they know what the Gadsden flag is? That it's a historical flag?
So they're, the reason that they do not want the flag, the reason we do not want the flag displayed is due to its origins with
The Revolutionary
slavery and slave trade. That is what was, that's the reasoning behind why we do not want this displayed.
The Gadsden flag.
The "Don't Tread on Me."
Okay. Which is the Gadsden flag. Okay. So he's what's going to happen if he doesn't take it off?
He is able to go. I was actually just telling him, like, I was upset that he was missing so much school. I'm like, so I asked if can he just take his stuff out of his bag and go back to class. Like, I just want him to go back to class. The bag can't go back. if it's got the patch on it, because we can't have that in and around other kids. So that's what I was trying to, and then he said you were close, so I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with slavery. That's like the Revolutionary War patch that was
Okay.
displayed when they were fighting the British. Like that wasn't, that's the revolution. Maybe you're thinking of like the Confederate Confederate flag.
Okay, I am
Is there
just
history
here
you
to
could
enforce.
tell me?
No, I am here to enforce the policy that was provided by the district,
Okay.
and definitely you have every right to not agree with it. I mean,
Yeah, because the
absolutely.
ACLU says that he's allowed to wear that. If you like go on their website, it's like says in big
So
letters.
all I'm saying is that
Unless there's like a ban on patches, period. Like if you said there's no patches allowed at the school, you cannot display what you think or anything like that, or what cheer or anything like that. I think it's like one-sided, you know, because you allow some patches but not other
Other
patches.
kids have patches like other names and like the American flag and backpacks.
Yeah. That was like flown during the revolution with, I just don't understand that at all.
so what I can do is
And
have you
if you
speak
go onto
to
the
our-
ACLU's website, let's talk to
I
someone,
can
because I don't want
have
a
you
lawsuit,
speak
I really
to
don't.
I can have you speak to our Jeff Yoakum
Okay.
again.
Okay.
And then he can refer you to our person at the district.
Okay.
Because like I said, we're following district policy
Okay.
is what we're doing.
Okay.
So the last thing I want is him out of class.
Yeah, I
Like,
know,
that's
me
all
too.
I-
He
the last
takes
thing I
his
want.
classes seriously, he
Yes.
studies, he wants to get straight A's, he did that. He made honor roll when he was here before.
Yeah.
He intends to do that again right now, but it's hard because he keeps missing class for this. So,
I understand that.
yeah, and I mean, we teach him to always stick up for your beliefs, and I mean, you're going over the revolution for 7th grade. I mean, the founding fathers stood up for what they believed in against unjust laws. This is unjust.
Okay, like I said, we're upholding a policy that was provided to us, which we have to uphold.
Okay.
Okay, so time for a quick history lesson. The Gadsden flag is named after Christopher Gadsden, who designed the flag in 1775 during the American Revolution. The flag is basically an 18th century middle finger emoji in the face of tyranny. But according to the school, it has roots in slavery. So what was their logic here? Well, according to emails shared by Connor Boyack on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it, there wasn't much logic to be found. So first off, they argued that the Gadsden flag is an unacceptable symbol, citing the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which determined that the flag originated in the Revolutionary War in a non-racial context. Oops. So the article they shared, which is a Washington Post article, so take it with a handful of salt, also said, however, whatever the historic origins and meaning of the symbol, it also has since been sometimes interpreted to convey racially tinged messages in some contexts. Sometimes interpreted, so sometimes not interpreted. This story gets even more ridiculous when we realize that the school director referenced this article by The Conversation, which cites a graphic design scholar from Iowa State University, who said, quote, because of its creator's history and because it is commonly flown alongside Trump 2020 flags, the Confederate battle flag, and other white supremacist flags, some may now see the Gadsden flag as a symbol of intolerance and hate, or even racism.
God, Karen, you are so stupid.
Don't you see how dangerous this is? It doesn't matter what something means. If you can find an example of someone maybe using it in a different way, that's all the proof you need that the something is bad. So if one random murderer had a flag with a unicorn on it, does that mean that unicorns symbolize murder? If someone in ISIS was shoveling down a Big Mac before his afternoon jihad, would we say that Ronald McDonald is a terrorist? None of this makes any sense, but the left does it all the time. So according to the school's director, the patch broke this rule. Any clothing, paraphernalia, grooming, jewelry, hair coloring, accessories, or body adornments that are or contain any advertisement, symbols, words, slogans, patches, or pictures that, 1, refer to drugs, tobacco, alcohol, or weapons are banned. But I thought this was all because the patch was racist. Either Jaden isn't allowed to wear this patch because it's racist, which it isn't, or he's not allowed to wear it because it refers to drugs, tobacco, alcohol, or weapons, which it doesn't. Either way, this is just a ridiculous example of anti-American censorship rearing its ugly head through a bureaucracy. No, the Gadsden flag is not racist and doesn't have anything to do with slavery. And while we don't know if the school would allow patches with other political messages like Black Lives Matter or the LGBTQ ABCDEFG flag, we do know that American history is under attack, part of a broad mission to erase and rewrite it all. The assault on education is probably the most dangerous part of the culture war. If we don't stand with people like Jaden and his family in defense of basic historical truths, then we've already lost. Back in May, the Writers Guild of America, which represents 11,500 screenwriters, went on strike over issues like residuals from streaming and artificial intelligence, bringing Hollywood grinding to a halt and costing the American economy around $5 billion. But to add insult to injury, 5 late-night hosts who have been left showless without their writing crews have announced a new podcast to raise proceeds for out-of-work staff and crew. Now, I think this is obviously a good cause, until we realize that having to watch Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver go it alone is going to be the comedy equivalent of Amy Schumer's The Leather Special translated into German. The Spotify podcast is called Strike Force 5, immediate proof that without writers, these people are nothing, and it was born out of weekly, hilarious, and compelling conversations they'd supposedly been having in private. And it's going to focus on the complexities behind the ongoing Hollywood strikes. My sides are splitting already. Here's the best trailer they could come up with.
One more time, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Fallon.
I'm Stephen Colbert.
I'm Jimmy Kimmel. I thought when you said Jimmy, you meant me, Jimmy, but you meant Jimmy.
I always mean you.
But when you say Seth Meyers, who do you mean?
I mean John Oliver.
It's the 5 of us together for maybe an hour a day.
Strike Force 5 is the name of our podcast. Subscribe to it now.
Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts.
But Spotify, you fucks.
It really highlights their comedic genius, doesn't it? Jimmy Fallon seems bored and or drunk. Jimmy Kimmel is laughing about the fact that 2 of them are called Jimmy. Stephen Colbert is doing nothing but grinning like an escaped mental patient. Seth Meyers struggles to read and is frankly lucky to be there. That's saying something. And John Oliver leans on his really one funny bit, being British and saying fuck. Classic. It's one thing for writers to fight for better treatment, but if this means that we have to suffer through Strike Force 5, I'm begging the entire Writers Guild of America to take one for the team and get back to work. WGA, you're our only hope. Sometimes the truth hurts, and it really hurts to watch the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's taking brain freezes to a whole new level. And no, I'm not talking about too much ice cream. So this happened when McConnell was in Kentucky, talking to reporters about some boring stuff that no one really cares about, before suddenly stopping mid-sentence and staring blankly into space.
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
He either had a seizure, a minor stroke, or maybe he saw the ghost of Merrick Garland lurking in the shadows. Who knows? But this isn't even the first time that McConnell had a glitch in his system. A few weeks ago, he did the same thing at another event, where he was rescued by a fellow Republican senator who's a doctor.
path to finishing the NDA this week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
And of course the media was all over this story, with headlines like McConnell freezes up a second time while addressing reporters, Senator Mitch McConnell appears to freeze again at a Kentucky event, and why Mitch McConnell's second freeze is more concerning than the first from the ever-concerned MSNBC. They also showed clips of his awkward silence on repeat and speculated about his health and future in politics. Now, this all highlights two glaring problems with our political system. I talked about this a bit in my column for the DC Examiner. First off, the hypocrisy. You see, both Democrats and Republicans are calling for McConnell to retire, but for vastly different reasons. Some because they hate him, some because they feel sorry for him, and the rest because they're worried he can't do his job. But why is it that only Republicans are pushed to retire when they are clearly losing their marbles? What about the Democrats who are also way past their prime, like Dianne Feinstein, who's 90 years old and can barely remember her own name? She's so old, she's decomposing in front of us. Or John Fetterman, who is so incoherent, he makes AOC sound like Shakespeare. Or Joe Biden, who's never met a child he hasn't sniffed and is so confused he's calling his Secretary of Transportation Pete Booty Juice.
And now it is my great honor to introduce the President of the United States, President Joe Biden.
Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg. Thank you all for being here. Please sit down.
But the media and the Democrats don't care about their own leaders' mental decline. They actually defend them and pretend that they are still sharp and capable. They act like nothing is wrong, even when they are clearly wrong about everything. And that brings us to the second problem with our political system, the power and greed. Because being a politician in America is a lucrative business. You get money, stock tips, perks, and you get to peddle influence. And you can share all of that with your friends and family, and they also benefit from your position. So why would you or they ever want to give that up? Even if you are old and senile and can't do your job anymore, why would you risk losing all of that by retiring and letting someone else take your place? Someone who might not be as loyal or as corrupt as you are. That's why politicians almost never retire voluntarily. They used to cling to power until they died or were forced out by scandal or defeat, and these days scandals won't even stop them, and losing an election is becoming just a mere speed bump. They don't care about serving the people or doing what's right. They only care about serving themselves and their wallets. And that's why we are stuck with a bunch of old fossils who can't solve any problems, but only create more of them. They get richer while a lot of us get poorer. We can only hope that one day they will wake up and realize how much damage they're doing to our country. But I'm not going to be holding my breath. And none of this is to say I don't feel sorry for Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, or John Fetterman as human beings. But when they work for us, there's no room for sympathy. I can have sympathy for someone with dementia until they're my accountant. They work for us. The least we can ask is that they know what day it is. This week, everyone's talking about the Gadsden Flag after a school in Colorado Springs tried to kick out this 12-year-old called Jaden for wearing it on his backpack. Well, because of the outrage this caused, and rightly so, this blew up in the school district's face and they backed off. So great job, internet. But not to be a party pooper, I'm going to poop on this party just a tiny bit because I think we're also missing the big picture. The fact is, we're looking at the culture war way too simply. Yes, it's great we're fighting the culture war, but what does that really mean? Most of the time, we're fighting little culture war battles, and we're being really successful. Think about Bud Light or Target. But sometimes, people are happy to win a battle, but forget about the war. In the case of Jaden, the battle was over his right to wear the Gadsden Flag patch. The war is over American history. So that's why we can't just be happy with the school district backing down. We have to take control of the narrative and defend history itself. Now, the history of the Gadsden Flag is clear. It's named after its designer, Christopher Gadsden, who was a brigadier general in the Continental Army and a South Carolina delegate to the Continental Congress. He designed the flag in 1775 during the American Revolution, and it was later adopted as the personal flag of the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Navy. The Continental Marines also flew the flag in the early years of the war. The rattlesnake was used as a symbol of the unity of the 13 colonies, and had been used before by other figures including Benjamin Franklin. The purpose of the flag was to warn against the violation of American liberties. Time after time, it's been shown that the Gadsden Flag is not racist. Instead, it's a symbol of unity in the face of tyranny. Then why is it so controversial?
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
gets the people going.
Well, the problem with our society is that too many people have no respect or interest in the past. Everything in the past is dumb, and everything now is enlightened. What makes matters worse is that people simply accept what they're told about America's own history. Sometimes it feels like the less true it is, the more it's celebrated, like the 1619 Project, especially if it helps push the narrative that the United States is uniquely evil. And there are other problems which make this even more complicated when it comes to symbols like the Gadsden Flag. The first is that history is taken to make everything somehow yours. What do I mean by this? Well, it's the idea that the history of the country, or parts of its history, only exists to help you get what you want now. This applies to the mainstream, but it's really damaging when it applies to the fringes. The Gadsden Flag has been used as a symbol across the mainstream by libertarian groups, right-wing groups, left-wing groups. But it's also been used by fringe and extremist groups. Back in 2014, for example, the perpetrators of a shooting in Las Vegas, who killed 2 police officers and a civilian, draped the body of one of the murdered officers in a Gadsden Flag. And then there are people who flew the Gadsden Flag during the riots on January 6th, and next to other flags like the Confederate flag and the Nazi flag in Charlottesville. In all cases, the Gadsden Flag is used as a symbol of liberty, depending on each person's definition of liberty. They can't all be right, so who decides what's right? And in many ways, it's also been diluted by its use on screen, again to promote some form of liberty. It's shown in Rocky IV, The Simpsons, Parks and Rec. So this leaves one question: what does the Gadsden Flag represent? If you care about history, it represents what it was designed to represent. But our society also has an identity problem, and it manifests in the idea that there is no such thing as objective truth. You are what you think you are, regardless of reality, and the world around you must conform. And this is spread into our symbols, our language, and our history. People see what they want to see, and reality must change to fit what they see. And even worse, there is no consistent standard. The use of these symbols and words are judged as good or bad, depending on the assumptions, fair or unfair, of the people using them. Here's one example. The Gadsden Flag appeared on HBO's The Last of Us in the house of Nick Offerman's character. The character, Bill, is gay, and gay people can't be racist according to intersectionality, so no one called it racist or bigoted or hateful. Then there's Jaden, an openly conservative 12-year-old boy, who walks into his school with the same flag on his backpack, and they try to kick him out because of the flag's non-existent links with racism and slavery. Why? The flag is the same. The difference is how the people using the flag are judged. But everything is backwards. People are forgetting or even ignoring the meaning of the flag and using their subjective judgment of the people using the flag to then judge the flag. But when we know the flag isn't racist and we know the history behind the flag, why are we judging the flag at all? Well, the answer is simple. This is all about fighting for control of history. In this case, American history. Because if you have control of what is true and what is not, then you have control of everything. And for the left, everything in our world, words, symbols, flags, is just a tool for them to get what they want. The Gadsden flag is no different. If it's being used by their friends, like the rainbow version of the Gadsden flag, then it's good. If it's being used to promote gun rights or individual liberty against government collectivism, it's bad. That's the real reason why they try to throw Jaden out of school. That's the real reason they cherry-pick only extreme usages of the flag to change its meaning. That's why it's racist when it needs to be. Because American history, rooted in individual liberty and the rejection of tyranny, is the threat. When you understand that, everything else makes sense.